Welcome to the Dublin Conversations. Paul, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello, I'm Paul Willis. I was formerly Professor of Corporate Communication at the University of Huddersfield, and I'm now working as a freelance trainer and researcher, while also being visiting professor at both Huddersfield and also Leeds Beckett University.
Paul, should we go around like 5 steps to the Dublin window and explore some ideas and your input into this thinking, these ideas, these ways we can develop new thinking for our industry? We've previously talked about the context we're in of paradoxical change and the need to learn from new inputs and new learning. How can we co-create? How can we unlearn some of our existing thinking, and what does better look like? So let's go really quickly into our 5 steps to the Dublin window. And really one of the key points for the Dublin Conversations is that previous efforts to define things such as, say, public relations, they've been hampered because they've been like the early astronomers defining like public relations at the centre of the universe and coming up with very elaborate explanations, rather than maybe seeing if it exists at all as part of a bigger universe. And so the Dublin Conversation proposed this idea about we have a fundamental need after breathing, eating, using your senses, of like managing the perceptions of others. And at the heart of that is this question of confidence. Confidence, not in a way that most people use it as like self-belief, but in a statistical sense of the probability of what you're perceiving as being shared as real by yourself and others. And so we're saying here that confidence is critical in terms of recognizing your consciousness, what you perceive to be reality, confidence in who you are, your purpose and purposefulness, confidence in others to help and harm you, and confidence others have in you, and this idea of zeitgeist confidence, the mood of the time. So we're saying this question of confidence is a critical known unknown, and that purpose and purposefulness makes it easier to create confidence by being more coherent and compelling in this task. So Paul, any thoughts there about this question of like, the role of significance of confidence?
Yeah, no, I really like that as a concept, Andy, and generally as a wider endorsement for the work that you've been doing with the Dublin conversations. I think my first observation is around the fact that maybe being more explicit about confidence in your consciousness in terms of how you set things out in step 1, because I'm taking that to be confidence in your own individual consciousness and what you perceive to be reality. However, I think maybe what you can do is expand that, because people can use this to look at what they do through a range of different lenses. So, for example, they can look at it from an individual professional point of view as communication professionals. They can look at it through the perspective of their own team, or probably even more interestingly, from a strategic point of view, from the perspective of their organization. So, for example, do they have confidence in their organization's consciousness, i.e. how it perceives reality? Does that actually match what stakeholders think, for example, about how it performs against its values, the services it delivers, etc., etc.? And as you and I know, that is one of the key roles of effective strategic communicators in terms of the role they take in their organization.
Another point sorry, Andy, about zeitgeist confidence. Any observations on that idea?
I love that as an idea. And again, I kind of take that to be sort of, confidence in the world outside. And I think that's a really smart piece of thinking, because often when people talk about confidence, they talk about economic confidence. We know all about that at the moment with the experiences that all economies around the world are going through at the moment. People, though, rarely talk about kind of confidence politically, socially, culturally, however you want to kind of frame those particular things. So I like that. I think the other way you can also do it, which is related to my previous point, is maybe zeitgeist confidence comes under a wider bracket of context confidence. So again, practitioners can use this in a variety of ways. So you can look at let's call it that wider macro context, so, which you've really kind of, nicely brought together in that idea around zeitgeist confidence. But you can also look at it from confidence in the context of your immediate surroundings, in the organization, in your own kind of particular sector, the sector which your organization operates in, its community, its country. So I think, that sort of understanding of that wider world, both in your immediate environs and also outside your window. Again, you can break that down, and practitioners working in different environments with different briefs. Some, for example, might be working in more of a kind of business to business environment that's quite kind of geographically constrained, while other practitioners will generally be operating in a globalized environment. So I think looking at context confidence would perhaps provide some more flexibility around.
And a way of suggestion about anchoring the idea of purpose and purposefulness down to the element of confidence. Any thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, no, again, I really like that. And the idea of purpose and purposefulness is not only smart, but also it's incredibly timely as well. There's a lot of debate within our industry at the moment about what do brands, what do organizations do during these very kind of turbulent and uncertain times we're living in. And there is a lot of discussion about the importance of helping to create purpose-driven organizations. And I know for a fact, Andy, you've been banging on about this personally for a long time. So it's nice to see that others are catching up with your thinking in this particular area.
Moving on then, we've got the idea of a framework of 5 rules. This is inspired by the work of people like Professor Daniel Kahneman, of 5 rules or heuristics that frame how we socially interact. So you've identified you've got a purpose, then what do you need to be doing to effectively socially interact? Any thoughts about this framework here, Paul, in terms of its significance and use and relevance?
Yeah, I think you might cover this off later, and obviously I've had a look at the steps in advance of this this interview, and I know you talk about listening later, but I suppose my initial reaction on that is it's very good, but it does still feel a little broadcast, and actually maybe something in there that more explicitly is not just about being talked about, but actually being listened to. Because if individuals or organizations are listened to, it's because they're trusted, they're authoritative, or they have particular kind of power, and that's really important. And we know about the power of influence and also persuasion. So I think this kind of listening aspect might work very well. And I know you've done again previously a lot of work on this, and there's many of us in this field who are very indebted to Jim McNamara and the work that he's done on listening. So I think being listened to, because also the other thing that underlines all of this, Andy, I think that I take from the work that you've done, both bringing this together but also previously, is this is actually about creating communications that is more dialogue based. And we'll talk later about the importance of that in the current climate. And at the heart of dialogue is listening and a willingness to shift your position and accommodate the views of others. So I think again, if you're thinking about your own competencies as an individual professional, or indeed your role advising organizations, being in a position where you or they are listened to is really important, because it wraps up a lot of these themes that I think sit around these different steps and the Dublin conversations more widely.
What you triggered there, Paul, is maybe the idea that there's a spectrum that exists, so like a known and noticed. There may be some situations where you've got the willfully be unknown and not noticed. So I'm just wondering like there that there's potential whether it's integrating that dimension of listening, which we do cover further in the model. But I think there's some interesting insights that you've sparked there.
I think so. I've built a career on spectrums and continuums and things, and I do think that's really, that's really important, because again, I think one of the key things is to recognize the complexity of the life of practitioners, and because this is great work, and it's important work, and it's about kind of raising the level of what the profession does and getting it to think more strategically and with more purpose, and crucially social purpose, and the contributions that we all need to make towards that. But there are also times in practitioners' lives where they're doing other type of work. They're doing stuff that is more instrumental, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's all about balance, and I think a spectrum or some kind of continuum would sort of capture some of those realities and nuances of practitioner life.
I love that concept of balance, because it implies not only balance within the individual spectrum of the 5 dimensions, but across and within them as well. So different degrees of emphasis. Yeah, I love that. And then moving on, we're saying that having then identified what you need to achieve, you've then got 5 open choices, which is an evolution of the PESO model, which, as I say, the fundamental difference of stress is that not channels, but choices, strategic options you have. So under own would also include your listening ability. So if you're seen and perceived to be someone who listens, that in itself is a form of engagement. Own can also include like spending time with someone to earn trust. And lastly, like channels. And so there's a new dimension there of nudge as a sort of how you make it easier for the choices available to people to head in the direction you would like them to go down. So I just wonder, any thoughts on that model therefore?
Yeah, I suppose my only my kind of initial impression around that, because there is a lot of talk about behaviors, and a lot of talk in our profession around the need to enact behavior change, and I suppose there's been a lot of discussion about nudge and and the nudge unit in number 10 and elsewhere, and obviously that's become part of the kind of vernacular in our profession, but when you think about long-term systematic behavior change, it takes a lot more than nudge. I think nudge is a good way often of looking at about how you can achieve short-term changes or spikes in behavior. So the well-publicized examples they've used from the nudge unit about how you word particular letters to increase the tax take for central government. It's a classic example of nudge. But when you talk about things around, obesity, for example, long-term wicked systemic problems where behavior change is at the so-called heart of the solution, then it is more than nudge. People might argue against that and say, well, it's a succession of nudges. But actually, I think that's to undermine the complexity of a lot of the work that's been done in behavior change in our profession, particularly in the last kind of 20 odd years.
I think the idea you provoked in my mind is that is there potentially a tactical nudge and a strategic nudge that where it could exist. But again, the critical thing is it doesn't operate in isolation, but rather in a synergistic way with the 5 choices. And again, there might be times where you use all 5 or a relation there. Then moving on then to sort of a full step about the importance of the emergence and our environment, our world as we understand it, is not through design but through emergence. And a very simple but really profound model developed by Professor Gareth Loudon of Imperial College London that really brings down the task of being creative and responding to the world of a simple model of listening, connect, doing, and in a virtuous loop there, and the stronger the sense of purpose at the heart of it, the bigger the engine for the dynamic to operate. And we need to listen bottom up and top down. And also we live in a world where the label comms has emerged, and yet without any formal definition. And so we're saying is, firstly, is there a need for a label? And secondly, it should be a label that is bigger than integrated communications, also to include influencing behaviours, managing behaviours, and being purposeful and building social cohesion. So as a candidate here, and as I say, the Dublin conversation welcomes challenging and so that we can come up with an even better new iteration. We're suggesting that comms can be defined as how you create confidence within yourself and with others to exist, coexist, cooperate, or collaborate by managing perceptions around your future behaviours, which is fundamental to being purposeful. And there are two sort of prime instincts that drive people's listening and doing of a we-led instinct, which is where your first response is to think of the others, the communal good, and me-led thinking, where it's about self-interest. And maybe that these could be like the foundation stones for maybe potential public relations philosophy and attitude, which is dominated by a we-led response, and maybe an advertising response, which is dominated by a me-led thinking. A lot of the packing there, Paul, but any sort of thoughts about is there a need for a label and potential candidates and qualities of what you're here?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I think the first thing you probably already got covered off, but in the in that third bullet point about managing behaviours,
Yeah.
I suspect what you're talking about there is managing your own behaviours.
Yeah.
Because I think, you know, sort of managing the behaviours of others is a bit too Orwellian, and we mentioned earlier about behaviour change, and there's a whole wider debate around the ethics and morals around that. So I would probably want to make that more explicit. And then I think the next point is I like the idea around, I mean, as an academic, you know, you fall down the hole of definitions, and everyone loves a good definition. But really, I think in a sense, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, I might be putting words in your mouth or a purpose that wasn't there, is you seem to me to be really being sort of, rather than have the label, let's get the definition right. And then it's up to, if people want to call it whatever they want to call it, that is fine. And I think there will always be disparities around labels, because, you know, they're culturally determined. They're based around a particular professional tribe we think we inhabit, the people we mix with, our career journeys and trajectories. The crucial thing is, are we all roughly fundamentally doing the same thing? And is there a kind of a common understanding around that? And if there is, people can call themselves what they want, in a sense. It would be lovely if we all called ourselves the same thing. So this idea about bringing out this wider strategic purpose is really, really important, I think.
So, I mean, I was saying there about confidence again. So these labels, which I like using the word memes. So essentially, how can we create a meme, and a meme that survived through creating an emotional connection to have meaning and significance to others? So yeah, as I say, I think hopefully we'll sort of provide some ingredients to facilitate those memes emerging now. And then the last one I want to talk about step 5 is an idea developed growing out of a concept originally created by Professor Jim McNamara, where he identified the distrust-trust spectrum, which you like there, Paul, 0 to 10, and at one end you've got distrusting, and then the other end you've got over-trusting. And the Dublin conversations proposing this, that to recognise that over-trusting can be the seedbed, not just of naivety, but dogma, bias, and prejudice. But critically, this middle zone, and there's a need maybe to create a label for that, of what we've suggested in a candidate is purposeful trust. Because without this purposeful trust, being open to understanding of others, it's a fundamental resource for enabling social cohesion. We cannot exist, cooperate or collaborate without it. And so critically then going forward, there's a need to emphasise that it's not only about earning confidence, but also at the same time invest in social cohesion. And maybe a candidate term, again, of this idea of regenerative comms that seeks to both earn confidence and replenish and enhance purposeful trust and a wider social fabric that holds society together. Any thoughts on those ideas?
Yeah, I really like that. There's a couple of points. I think the social cohesion point about investing in social cohesion is really important. And I think, you know, and I know this, you know, this will be, you know, this will be your attention, but that for me speaks very much back to the we thinking in the previous slide, because I think the danger in the world that we live in at the moment is everyone thinks about social dissonance and fragmentation, with echo chambers, increasing polarization on issues. It's quite a scary world. But actually, what we need to do is remember the things we have in common, and that's back to we thinking. Thinking about the things that we hold dear, that bring us together. And actually, when you do step back and you get your head out of the daily news and everything else, and the doom and gloom that's going on around, and the polarization and everything else, you actually do remember that there is more that brings us together than actually divides us. So I think that's really good and important. I really like the idea of regenerative communication. That kind of sustainability aspect to it. You kind of, you reap what you sow. You're investing now in something in the future. Again, similar point, linked to a couple of points that I made earlier around, I love a good spectrum and a continuum, because what you could say is that communication is itself, or should be, regenerative, or the other way to look at it is that there is regenerative communication, but it is one form of communication. You can almost argue that it is at the top of a kind of a pyramid, like Maslow's hierarchical hierarchy of needs, like self-actualization. You have regenerative communication, but also there will be work that you do that isn't necessarily that invested in the future. It's about dealing with the here and now and issues. And you can argue that all of that, of course, is about protecting the organization, but it probably isn't necessarily about replenishing and enhancing purposeful trust. It's just about dealing with a whole basket of horrible issues that you've got in front of you as a communicator. So again, maybe sort of how that is positioned will again sort of reflect some of the wider complexities of kind of practice going forward.
Again, boy, you trigger some thinking there, and the image that comes to my mind is that we have sort of in the spectrum not only a one dimension, but we have a vertical spectrum and a horizontal one, which work in tandem. And I do see immediately there's some potential around different levels of degree of regenerative communications. I think that'd be some fascinating further model to develop there. And then lastly, having done the 5 steps, you feel more confident about addressing this question at our industry of what does better look like?
Absolutely. I think it's a really fresh, as I'd expect from you, Andy. I mean, you know the profession inside out, and you're a creative thinker. And I think what this has done is it's a re-articulation and a fresh way of looking at what we've done. Again, the other thing which gives me confidence is I know how much hard work has been put into also making sure this is underpinned by excellent academic research, both the people who are actually involved in it, like you, but also drawing in, multidisciplinary perspectives, which again is really important. Something that I've tried to do in my own work is to get out of our sort of, intellectual silos and bring in really smart thinking from elsewhere. And again, you've done that, and you can see in terms of how you've explained it. But it does take some explanation, I think. And when I first saw it, and obviously you've been kind enough to keep me sort of updated on this project as it's been running. I still needed you to chat me through some aspects of it, because I wasn't sure that I was kind of grasping what was at play on some of this. But when it is explained and you have an opportunity to engage in it, then it, like you've said, it triggers rich thinking.
I think you've partly asked the next question. I mean, one point to respond there is that we say we've been working on this for 4 years to get it this simple, but we are obviously still much more work to do. So in terms then of anything else we should be doing different to realise the goal of creating a better legacy?
No, because I think what you're doing, and again, it shows tremendous largesse on behalf of you and the rest of the team, and also smart thinking, is you're putting it out there. You know, you're putting it out to people to see about how it looks, and maybe they might articulate things differently. I always think on things like this, and it's one of the, theory, there's nothing as practical as a good theory.
Yeah.
And part of the reason for that is because people take it and then they repurpose it for their own context and their own thinking. But crucially, they know where the hinterland of that is. And what this does is provide a great hinterland for people to develop their own way of articulating it. Because I always say, when I run sessions with people about, the nature of strategic communication and strategic contribution, I put forward different perspectives. But I always say to them, the crucial thing is you've got to put forward something that works for you and the people around you and the people that you advise. So, however, here's something that might help your thinking in that particular area. So I think you've got that nice balance around this, that you've given people something that is very thought-provoking. And some will use it lock, stock and barrel, and others will use it to either develop their own way of thinking or they'll re-articulate it differently.
And certainly the word balance has been sort of emerging out of me as one of the key concepts through this conversation. Paul, really appreciate you spending the time, some profound, challenging and provocative insights that hopefully, as I say, will grow our collective thinking, our collective wisdom. Thank you so much, Paul.
Well, Andy, it's entirely my pleasure and well played.
So, thank you so much, Paul.
All right, mate.